They say success is the best revenge. But when your ex-wife steals your life's work and invites you to celebrate her betrayal, revenge requires something more strategic. After 5 years of marriage, Jessica walked out on me, declaring my programming career a dead end and my potential wasted. What she didn't mention was that she'd already shared my proprietary algorithms with her new boyfriend's company. Algorithms that would soon revolutionize how small businesses compete with corporations. The universe has a sense of humor. The day after she left, my innovation finally caught an investor's attention. So when their embossed wedding invitation arrived 6 months later, I didn't tear it up like most men would. Instead, I checked "will attend" with a smile that would have worried Jessica had she seen it. Because when you've been underestimated your entire life, there's a certain satisfaction in proving everyone wrong, especially when they've invited an audience to witness it. The glow of my monitors cast blue shadows across the desk as I worked through another late night. Outside my home office window, our suburban neighborhood slept, but inside my mind raced with possibilities. My predictive inventory management system was nearly complete, the culmination of 3 years' work that could transform how small businesses competed with corporate giants. I rubbed my eyes and glanced at the framed photo on my desk. Jessica and I on our wedding day 5 years ago, her eyes bright with promise as she whispered, "We're going to build something amazing together." Back then, she believed in my vision of creating software that would level the playing field for independent businesses. Back then, my obsession with coding was endearing, not a source of constant criticism. The front door opened and closed. Jessica was home from another late work event, the third this week. I saved my progress and closed the laptop, hoping to share my latest breakthrough. The algorithm had finally passed all test scenarios with a 98.7% accuracy rate. "You're still up." Jessica stood in the doorway, elegant in a black dress I didn't recognize. Her tone wasn't a question, but an indictment. "I wanted to show you something. The core prediction model is finally working. Look at these test results." I gestured to my notebook filled with validation data. She glanced at it without moving closer. "That's nice, Ryan, but Daniel's company just closed another round of funding, $15 million. That's what success looks like." She slipped off her heels. "We should get to bed. We have the Millers' dinner party tomorrow." The comparison to Daniel Prescott stung. Jessica had mentioned him with increasing frequency since she began working with his company 3 months ago. CEO of Prescott Technologies, with venture capital connections and the confidence that came from inherited wealth. Everything I wasn't. The algorithm isn't just working, Jess. It's revolutionary. This could be what we've been waiting for. We've been waiting 3 years, Ryan. Her voice softened with what sounded like pity. "I'm tired." The dinner party the next evening at Jessica's colleague's home proved worse than I anticipated. I felt underdressed among the venture capital crowd, despite my best button-down shirt. Jessica seemed to compensate by being especially animated, laughing too loudly at inside jokes about funding rounds and market valuations. "Ryan's been working on a project for small business inventory," she explained when someone asked what I did. The diminutive description of years of innovation made me wince. "Fascinating," said Daniel Prescott, though his tone suggested otherwise. He stood too close to Jessica, their shoulders touching. "What's the monetization strategy?" Before I could answer, Jessica laughed. "That's Ryan's weakness. He's more interested in building something meaningful than profitable." She touched Daniel's arm. "Not everyone has your business sense." I maintained my composure as conversations swirled around IPOs and acquisitions. Jessica kept finding ways to compare my approach to Daniel's, each comparison leaving me diminished. "Daniel just secured backing from Westland Partners," she announced to the table. "Wouldn't it be nice, Ryan, if you focused on what actually makes money instead of your passion project?" Daniel offered false modesty. "My team does the real work. I just make sure they have what they need." "Different paths work for different people," I replied evenly. "I believe in building something sustainable." Our host, sensing tension, attempted a redirect. "Ryan, Jessica mentioned you're working on something for small businesses." "He is," Daniel interjected before I could speak. "Sounds interesting. I should take a look sometime." "You should," Jessica agreed quickly. "Ryan could use your perspective." The car ride home hummed with tension. I finally broke the silence as we turned onto our street. "It hurt when you compared me to Daniel in front of everyone." Jessica sighed. "You're overreacting. I was just making conversation. By repeatedly pointing out how much more successful he is than me. If you're feeling insecure, that's not my fault." She stared out the window. "Maybe if you'd taken that corporate job 3 years ago, instead of chasing this dream, we wouldn't be having this conversation." The next day, I found myself in Frank's workshop. My neighbor, a retired engineer in his 70s, had become both mentor and friend since we moved in. His garage smelled of sawdust and machine oil, a reassuring constant. "Marriage has ups and downs," Frank said, carefully measuring a piece of wood. "But there's a difference between supporting someone through struggles and undermining them." "She's just frustrated with our financial situation," I offered, though the excuse sounded hollow even to me. Frank made a precise cut before responding. "My wife used to tell me, when someone shows you who they are, believe them the first time." That evening, I noticed Jessica's laptop was password protected, something new. When I mentioned it, she said it contained confidential work documents. A reasonable explanation, yet something felt off, just like the way she now took calls in another room, or how she'd suddenly developed an interest in the technical aspects of my project. "So explain again how your algorithm handles predictive inventory," she asked over dinner one night. "I want to understand your work better. It's complex, but essentially it uses historical data patterns to anticipate needs before they arise," I explained, surprised by her interest. "It can predict seasonal variations, supply chain disruptions, even customer behavior shifts. Why the sudden curiosity?" "Just trying to be supportive," she said, typing notes into her phone. "That's what you wanted, right?" The disconnect between her words and actions created a persistent unease. That night, I lay awake listening to Jessica's steady breathing beside me, wondering when exactly my wife had become a stranger. The first concrete evidence came while using Jessica's computer to check our joint bank account when mine was updating. The browser history showed searches for intellectual property in divorce and ownership of spouses' business ideas. Harmless legal research, perhaps, except they coincided with her growing closeness to Daniel and his company. I began paying closer attention. Jessica had started scheduling regular working lunches with Daniel that never appeared on her shared calendar. She asked increasingly specific questions about my algorithm's implementation details, information I'd freely shared, believing I was finally engaging her interest. One evening, while Jessica was at a team-building event, I found a notebook in her desk drawer. Inside were detailed notes on my software's core functions, the same functions she'd dismissed as a waste of time for years. The handwriting was unmistakably hers, with annotations about potential applications and market value. My stomach knotted as I carefully replaced the notebook. This wasn't idle curiosity or sudden support. This was reconnaissance. The betrayal wasn't just the theft of intellectual property, but the calculated nature of it. Jessica had been planning this for weeks, perhaps months. Each question about my work wasn't interest, but extraction. Each criticism of my career wasn't frustration, but preparation, setting a narrative of my failure to justify her actions. The next day, I met Dev, a programmer friend from my weekly poker group, at a coffee shop downtown. The noise of the espresso machines provided privacy as we huddled over our laptops. "I interviewed at Prescott Technologies last week," Dev said, keeping his voice low. "They're pivoting to small business services, building a predictive inventory platform that sounds remarkably similar to what you've described at poker nights." I felt the blood drain from my face. Jessica's been asking very specific questions about my algorithms lately. Dev's expression confirmed my fears. "That timing doesn't feel coincidental, man." "Could be parallel development," I offered weakly. "Great minds thinking alike." "Maybe." Dev didn't sound convinced. "But the way they described the core prediction model, it was your approach. The same technical challenges you've been solving." He hesitated. "I wouldn't normally say this, but you need to protect yourself. Document everything. Secure your code." That night, I decided to confront Jessica directly. I waited at the kitchen table until she returned home at 9:30 p.m. "We need to talk," I said, as she set down her purse. "I've noticed you're taking a sudden interest in the technical details of my work. Is there something I should know?" Jessica's expression flickered between surprise and irritation. "So now I'm not allowed to understand what my husband does? Maybe if I'd paid more attention sooner, you'd have made progress by now." "That's not what I meant. My project notes were moved from where I left them. You've been making detailed notes about my algorithms." "I'm trying to help you articulate your ideas better," she said, her voice rising defensively. "You've always struggled with the business side." I took a deep breath. "Are you sharing my work with Daniel or his company?" Jessica's face hardened. "Listen to yourself." "This is exactly why I'm finding it hard to be around you, these paranoid accusations. Maybe you need therapy, Ryan." Before I could respond, her phone chimed. She glanced at it and grabbed her keys. "I have to go. Work emergency." At 9 p.m., "Some of us have real jobs with real responsibilities," she snapped, and was gone before I could respond. I sat alone in our kitchen, the house suddenly too quiet. Her defensive reaction told me everything I needed to know. The question wasn't whether Jessica was betraying my trust, but how extensively and for how long. That night, I backed up all my work to secure cloud storage that Jessica didn't know about. I password-protected everything and created a detailed log of my development timeline with timestamps. It felt paranoid, but Dev's warning echoed in my mind. Protect yourself. As I worked through the night securing my intellectual property, I realized how thoroughly Jessica had isolated me. The friends we still saw regularly were primarily her colleagues. My own social circle had shrunk as I focused on my work. Even my family lived across the country. Their understanding of my marriage filtered through occasional phone calls where I downplayed problems to avoid worry. The isolation made her betrayal more effective. Who would believe that the charming, socially adept Jessica was systematically stealing her husband's work? The narrative was already in place. Obsessive programmer husband, patient wife who finally gave up waiting for success. My legitimate concerns would sound like the bitter accusations of an abandoned spouse. I stared at our wedding photo, still sitting on my desk. The Jessica I married, or thought I married, seemed like a different person entirely from the woman who had just stormed out after gaslighting me about my own work. Had she changed, Or had I simply failed to see who she truly was? Either way, something had broken that couldn't be repaired. Trust, once shattered, leaves too many sharp edges to safely reassemble. The following Tuesday, I had a promising job interview with a tech firm that had expressed interest in my approach to predictive analytics. For the first time in months, I felt a glimmer of hope. Perhaps, with a stable income, Jessica would stop comparing me unfavorably to Daniel. Perhaps our marriage could still be saved. The interview went well. The technical director seemed genuinely impressed by my portfolio and approach. "We need innovative thinkers like you," he said as we shook hands. "Expect to hear from us by week's end." I drove home with renewed optimism, rehearsing how I'd tell Jessica about this potential turning point. When I pulled into our driveway at 2 p.m., I noticed Janet from across the street quickly looking away. Odd, but not alarming until I entered our house. The silence hit me first. Then the small absences: Jessica's coat missing from the rack, her favorite books gone from the shelf. In our bedroom, her closet stood half empty, the bare hangers a skeletal reminder of what had been there that morning. On the kitchen counter lay a note in her precise handwriting. "Ryan, I can't keep waiting for your potential to become reality. I need a partner whose ambition matches mine. I've moved out. I'll contact you about dividing our assets. Jay." My phone showed 3 missed calls from mutual friends. The first voicemail confirmed what the empty closet had already told me. "Ryan, I'm so sorry. Jessica said you two had already discussed this. I wouldn't have helped her move if I'd known. Call me when you can." The clinical efficiency of Jessica's exit was stunning. She'd planned this meticulously, ensuring I'd be gone during her departure. The friends who helped her move believed they were participating in a mutual decision rather than an abandonment. I walked numbly to my office, needing the comfort of work to process what had happened. That's when I discovered my main laptop was missing, the one containing my most recent work. My backup device remained, but the development environment I'd carefully built over months was gone. I checked our joint bank account on my phone. The $12,000 we'd saved, primarily from my freelance programming jobs, had been transferred out that morning, leaving only $327. As the shock began to crystallize into something harder, my phone pinged with an email notification. Through a fog of disbelief, I opened it. "Dear Mr. Carter, after reviewing the documentation you provided, we're extremely interested in your predictive inventory management system. Your approach to small business needs is genuinely innovative. We'd like to discuss potential funding at your earliest convenience. Regards, Elaine Chen, Vertex Ventures." The universe's timing was either cruel or illuminating. The day after Jessica left, claiming my career was a dead end, a significant investor recognized the value of my work, the work Jessica had just walked away with. My phone buzzed with a text from Dev. "Heard through the grapevine that Prescott Tech is fast-tracking something new. Announcement expected within weeks. Timing seems suspicious." I replied with numb fingers, "Jessica left yesterday. Took my main laptop." His response was immediate. "Call your lawyer. Now." The pieces clicked together with devastating clarity. Jessica hadn't just left me. She'd executed corporate espionage. Her exit wasn't about our marriage failing. It was timed precisely to deliver my intellectual property to Daniel's company before I could secure my own funding. The following days passed in a blur of legal consultations and desperate attempts to reconstruct my work from backups. I discovered Jessica had been methodically copying my files for weeks, taking snapshots of my progress while planting seeds of doubt about my abilities. The woman who slept beside me, had been systematically undermining and robbing me, all while preparing her exit strategy. I moved to a small apartment across town, unable to afford our house alone with the savings gone. The contrast between my sparse new accommodations and the life I'd lost struck me every time I returned home. A futon for a bed, a folding table for a desk, takeout containers instead of home-cooked meals. The physical manifestation of how thoroughly Jessica had stripped away my life. Yet something unexpected happened in that bare apartment. With the pretense of my marriage gone, with Jessica's constant criticism silenced, my work flourished. The core algorithms I reconstructed from backups evolved rapidly, developing in new directions without the weight of perceived failure. My mind, freed from the constant effort to earn approval, found solutions that had eluded me for months. When the job offer came through, I accepted gratefully. The steady income allowed me to build a new development environment and hire a part-time assistant to help document my work. Every line of code, every innovation, every test result was meticulously recorded with timestamps and witnesses, preparing for the battle I knew was coming. 6 months later, the final confirmation arrived in an embossed cream envelope with a silver border. Inside, elegant calligraphy announced the wedding of Jessica Marie Adams and Daniel James Prescott. A handwritten note was tucked inside. Thought you'd want to see what success looks like. The same day, Prescott Technologies issued a press release announcing their breakthrough predictive inventory system for small businesses, a technology that would revolutionize how independent retailers compete with corporate chains. I spread the wedding invitation beside the press release on my small apartment table. The implementation details described in the press material were unmistakably my work, right down to the approach for handling seasonal variations that had taken me months to perfect. 6 months earlier, this would have broken me. Now, it merely confirmed what I needed to know. I picked up the RSVP card and checked "Will attend" with a steady hand, then reached for my phone. "James," I said when my attorney answered, "it's time to move forward with the plan. They've just invited all their investors to witness their fraud." The symmetry was perfect. Jessica and Daniel thought the wedding invitation was a final twist of the knife, a demonstration of their triumph over me. Instead, they had handed me the perfect stage for exposure. All the key players in their success would be gathered in one place, watching as their carefully constructed facade crumbled. As I hung up the phone, I noticed my reflection in the window. Calm, focused, resolved. The desperate, betrayed husband had been replaced by someone stronger, someone who understood that justice required not emotional outbursts, but strategic patience. Jessica had taken my work and my dignity. I would reclaim both on my own terms. James Hudson's law office featured floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city skyline, a stark contrast to my modest apartment. His wall displayed degrees from prestigious universities and certificates in intellectual property law. Across his conference table, I'd spread the evidence of Jessica and Daniel's theft, development logs, cloud backup timestamps, the wedding invitation, and Prescott's press materials. "Most developers don't document like this," James said, examining my meticulously dated notebooks. "You've created a perfect paper trail of your innovation." "Jessica used to mock these habits as obsessive," I replied. "Said I was wasting time that could be spent coding. Those obsessive habits have given us an ironclad case." James pointed to my cloud repository. "The timestamps and version history create an undeniable chronology. We can prove you developed these algorithms long before Prescott Technologies suddenly innovated in this space." James flipped through the press releases from Prescott Technologies, comparing their technical descriptions with my original documentation. The similarities weren't just conceptual, but structural. The same approach to seasonal inventory prediction, the same method for handling supply chain anomalies, even similar naming conventions in some cases. They didn't even bother to substantially modify the architecture, James noted. That's either arrogance or carelessness. Or both, I said. Daniel's used to buying success, not earning it. Jessica understood my work well enough to steal it, but not well enough to disguise the theft. So we file the lawsuit now? James shook his head. Sometimes the best move is to let your opponent overcommit before showing your hand. Prescott's already publicly claiming this technology as their own. They've built marketing materials, investor presentations, perhaps even taken funding based on stolen work. The wedding invitation, I said, understanding dawning. All their key investors will be there, their entire professional network. Exactly. If we move now, they'll construct a narrative that portrays you as a disgruntled ex-husband. But if we secure your legitimate business first, then time our revelation for maximum impact. He tapped the invitation thoughtfully. For the first time since Jessica left, I felt a genuine smile forming. Sometimes, patience is the best strategy. Precisely. Now let's talk about securing funding for your legitimate company. The planning process over the next several days was meticulous. James helped me prepare a comprehensive presentation for potential investors, emphasizing both the innovation of my technology and the clear documentation proving its origins. We identified key venture capital firms that might be interested in both the technology and the David versus Goliath narrative our case presented. Don't lead with the theft, James advised. Lead with the innovation. The theft is a complication to overcome, not the core of your value proposition. 2 days later, I sat across from Elaine Chen in the sleek offices of Vertex Ventures. My presentation materials displayed clear evidence of my innovation and its market potential. Elaine, a venture capitalist with 20 years of experience, studied my validation data with impressive focus. This solves problems others aren't even acknowledging yet, she said finally. Your approach to fluctuating supply chains alone would be valuable, but combining it with customer behavior prediction creates something truly disruptive. Thank you. I hesitated, then decided on complete transparency. Full disclosure, my ex-wife took my work to a competitor. Prescott Technologies is currently developing a platform based on my algorithms. Instead of concern, Elaine's expression showed recognition. Unfortunately common in this industry, Silicon Valley is built on stolen ideas. She leaned forward. But you have something they don't, the authentic vision behind the code. What do you mean? Anyone can implement an algorithm if they have the blueprint, but the person who created it understands why it works, how to evolve it, where it might fail. That's what investors ultimately fund, the mind behind the innovation. She tapped my presentation. This isn't just about revenge, is it? No, I answered honestly. This technology can help thousands of small businesses survive against corporate competition. That was always the goal. Good. Revenge is fleeting. Impact is lasting. She made a decision. We're prepared to offer $2 million in Series A funding, enough to build your team, establish the company properly, and fight any legal battles necessary. I maintained my composure, but inside, validation washed through me like a wave. Thank you for believing in this. I'm not the only one who will, Elaine replied. I've arranged meetings with 3 industry veterans who might join your board, people whose reputations would further legitimize your claim to this innovation. The following week brought meetings with potential board members, discussions with developers I trusted, and strategic planning sessions with James. Unlike Jessica and Daniel's rush to market, our approach would be methodical and thorough. We would build a legitimate company around my innovation, establishing undeniable credibility before confronting the theft. What struck me most during this process was how differently I was treated compared to my experience with Jessica. Where she had dismissed my work as impractical obsession, these industry veterans saw valuable innovation. Where she had mocked my documentation habits, they praised my thoroughness. The contrast revealed how thoroughly Jessica's criticism had distorted my self-perception. Back at my apartment that evening, I created a whiteboard timeline leading to the wedding date. 8 weeks to build a legitimate company, secure the necessary documentation, and prepare for the confrontation. I'd need developers I could trust, legal preparation, and strategic allies at the event itself. My attorney James arrived with takeout dinner, and we outlined the complete strategy. Unlike Jessica and Daniel's rush to market, our approach would be methodical and thorough. "We could send cease and desist letters now," suggested James's associate. I shook my head. "No, let them announce to the world first. The higher they climb with my work, the more significant their fall." James nodded. "The wedding gives us the perfect stage. Everyone who matters will witness their exposure." I looked at Jessica and Daniel's wedding invitation pinned to the center of my timeline. For the first time since she left, I felt not just determination, but a calm certainty. Jessica had taught me a painful but valuable lesson. Trust must be earned, not given. And actions reveal character more truthfully than words ever could. "Time to get my suit pressed," I said, feeling the weight of victimhood fall away. Whatever happened next, I would face it not as Jessica's abandoned husband, but as my own advocate, the rightful creator of technology that could genuinely help others. 4 weeks before the wedding, my newly formed company, Carter Innovation Systems, made its preliminary announcement at the regional tech conference. We described our forthcoming platform for small business inventory management without revealing all implementation details. The press release emphasized my years of development work and our forthcoming launch. Our booth was modest compared to the elaborate displays from established companies, but it generated surprising interest. Several small business owners stopped to discuss their inventory challenges, validating the real-world need for my solution. Industry analysts asked thoughtful questions about our approach, and I answered carefully, revealing enough to establish legitimacy without exposing proprietary details. I was arranging brochures when Daniel Prescott appeared, his surprise at seeing me poorly concealed beneath a veneer of confidence. "Ryan, good to see you." His handshake was firm, his smile practiced. "Sorry things didn't work out with Jessica, but she's happy now." "I'm sure she is." I maintained steady eye contact. "Interesting presentation earlier. Some of those approaches seemed familiar." A flicker of unease crossed his face before his confidence reasserted itself. "Great minds think alike, I suppose. Perhaps, or some minds simply recognize value worth taking." His smile tightened. "Careful, Ryan." "That sounds dangerously close to an accusation." "Just an observation." I handed him our company brochure. "Our beta launch is next month. Your investors might find the timing interesting." As Daniel walked away, I noticed his phone already at his ear. A technology journalist approached my booth before I could speculate about the call. "Ryan Carter? I'm Sophia Liu from Tech Insider. I noticed overlap between your announcement and Prescott Tech's platform. Any connection there?" "I've been developing this technology for 3 years," I replied carefully. "I have extensive documentation of my work. Beyond that, I'll let the timeline speak for itself." Sophia's eyebrows rose. Intriguing. Mind if I ask you a few more questions? By day's end, whispers circulated through the conference. I overheard an investor questioning Daniel about the coincidental similarities between the platforms. Daniel's answers grew increasingly defensive as the day progressed. The following week brought unexpected momentum. Sophia's article highlighted the mysterious timing of similar technologies emerging from Carter Innovation Systems and Prescott Technologies, noting my years of documented development. 3 small business associations reached out about potential partnerships, and a respected industry blog published an analysis of Prescott's sudden pivot into small business services. "They're feeling the pressure," James observed during our weekly strategy meeting. "Public scrutiny makes it harder for them to dismiss questions about the technology's origins." 2 weeks later, a cease and desist letter arrived from Prescott Technologies' legal team. They claimed my company was infringing on their intellectual property and demanded we cease development of our platform. "Any claims that Prescott Technologies has appropriated your client's work are defamatory and will be treated as such," the letter concluded. James read it twice, then smiled. "They're scared. What's our response? We maintain course. This aggression confirms their worry." He tapped the letter. "They wouldn't bother if they weren't concerned about your legitimate claim." That afternoon, we received an unexpected visitor at our office, a woman who introduced herself as Amanda Winters, former administrative assistant at Prescott Technologies. "I processed their patent applications," she explained, sitting nervously at our conference table. "I recognized similar technology being filed under different names. When I asked questions, I was dismissed. Then I saw your press release and realized what might be happening." "Why come to us?" James asked. "Because I believe in doing what's right." She placed a flash drive on the table. "This contains the original files that came to our office before they were altered. The metadata and properties still show they originated on your computer, Mr. Carter." Amanda's testimony and evidence strengthened our position considerably. The files showed unmistakable digital fingerprints linking them to my development environment, proof that would be difficult for Prescott to explain away. "They rushed the patent applications," Amanda explained. "Normal procedure includes a thorough provenance check for new technologies. That step was skipped on direct orders from Daniel." "Did Jessica Adams have any role in the process?" I asked, maintaining professional detachment despite the personal connection. "She delivered the initial files," Amanda confirmed. "She was introduced as a technology consultant, but everyone knew she was Daniel's girlfriend. She attended the technical meetings where they discussed implementation." James made arrangements for Amanda to provide a formal deposition, adding her testimony to our growing evidence file. Her inside perspective filled crucial gaps in our understanding of how the theft had been operationalized within Prescott's corporate structure. As the wedding date approached, we accelerated our preparations. Key industry figures who had expressed concerns about Prescott's claims received detailed briefings on the situation. Our legal team prepared evidence packages for distribution at the strategic moment. Elaine arranged for several respected venture capitalists to attend the wedding as guests of mutual friends, ensuring multiple credible witnesses for the revelation. The night before the wedding, I stood in my apartment reviewing the final preparations. My suit hung pressed and ready. Evidence packages had been prepared for key industry figures who would attend the ceremony. My small but dedicated team had built a functioning demonstration of my original work, proving my authentic understanding of the technology. Frank called to offer moral support. "Whatever happens tomorrow, you've already won by rebuilding with integrity." This isn't about revenge anymore, I realized. It's about standing up for what's mine and what's right. Stay calm, stick to facts, and let the evidence speak for itself, James advised in our final strategy call. Your dignity will be more damning than any accusation. I placed Jessica's photo in a drawer, symbolically closing that chapter of my life. Tomorrow would bring a new beginning, not just for me, but for the truth. As I prepared for bed, I realized how profoundly Jessica's betrayal had changed me. 6 months ago, I had been a trusting husband who shared everything with his wife. Now, I was a careful strategist preparing to publicly expose that same woman's theft. The transformation wasn't one I would have chosen, but it had revealed strengths I hadn't known I possessed: resilience, strategic thinking, and the courage to stand alone against powerful opponents. In losing what I thought was my future, I had found something more valuable: myself. The Prescott Adams wedding spared no expense. The botanical garden venue featured floating lanterns in the koi ponds and string quartets positioned throughout the manicured grounds. Champagne flowed freely as San Francisco's tech elite mingled beneath white pergolas draped with orchids. I adjusted my tie and approached the guest book, signing my name clearly. Several guests glanced my way, whispers following in my wake. Clearly, my attendance was unexpected. Jessica spotted me from across the reception area. Even from a distance, I could see her composed smile falter. She whispered something to Daniel, whose head snapped up to locate me in the crowd. He recovered quickly, plastering on a gracious expression as they made their way toward me. "You actually came," Jessica said, her white gown rustling as she stopped before me. "I wasn't sure you would." "I wouldn't miss it," I replied calmly. "Congratulations, Jessica." Daniel placed his arm possessively around her waist. "Ryan, good to see you moving forward. No hard feelings, I hope." "None at all. Today is about celebrating new beginnings, isn't it?" Jessica's eyes narrowed slightly, searching my face for sarcasm or bitterness. Finding neither, her confidence seemed to return. "Well, enjoy the celebration. We should greet our other guests." As they moved away, I circulated through the reception, greeting industry acquaintances. James's associate discreetly distributed slim folders to select guests, board members and key investors of Prescott Technologies. Elaine Chen arrived with 2 prominent venture capitalists, all 3 acknowledging me with subtle nods. The garden setting provided perfect acoustics for overhearing conversations. Near the champagne fountain, a board member was questioning Daniel's CTO about the remarkable development timeline of their inventory platform. By the koi pond, 2 investors discussed the curious coincidence of competing technologies emerging simultaneously. A silver-haired man studying one of the folders approached me. "Mr. Carter, Wallace Bennett, Westland Partners. Interesting documentation you've shared. Perhaps we should talk later." Jessica noticed these interactions with growing concern. Her picture-perfect composure began showing cracks as she watched investors huddled in serious conversation, occasionally glancing in my direction. The ceremony itself was brief but lavish, with Jessica and Daniel exchanging vows beneath an arch of white roses. I sat quietly in the back row, observing rather than participating. The minister spoke about honesty and trust in marriage, irony that wasn't lost on me. Dinner transitioned to toasts as the sun set. The best man spoke of Daniel's visionary leadership. Jessica's maid of honor reminisced about Jessica's determination to find a partner who matched her ambition. Each speech praised the perfect union of 2 rising stars in the tech world. When the MC asked if anyone else wished to offer congratulations, I calmly approached the microphone. A hush fell over the gathering. Jessica's knuckles whitened around her champagne flute. "To new beginnings," I began, raising my glass. "Jessica, When you left claiming my work would never succeed, I was devastated. Imagine my surprise when the very next day my innovation finally caught investor attention. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Daniel half rose from his seat before Jessica's hand on his arm stopped him. And my greater surprise, I continued evenly, when I saw my algorithms appearing in your new husband's company. The projection screen behind me, previously showing wedding photos, now displayed side-by-side comparisons of my documented work and Prescott Technologies' innovation. I'm not here for drama, but for truth. Everyone has received documentation showing the timeline of my work and its appearance in Prescott Technologies. As of this morning, my legitimate company has secured Series A funding, and my legal team has filed appropriate actions. I raised my glass once more. So yes, to new beginnings, built on innovation, not appropriation. To success earned through creativity, not acquired through theft. Chaos erupted as I stepped away from the microphone. Investors immediately began making calls or huddling in urgent conversation. Board members converged on Daniel, whose face had drained of color. Jessica stood frozen, her perfect day shattered by the truth she thought she'd buried. Daniel's CTO cornered him near the cake table, their heated whispers carrying across the suddenly quiet room. You told me this technology was developed in-house. If we've built our platform on stolen IP. Outside the venue, I declined media questions from the technology reporters who had been invited to cover the high-profile wedding. As I walked toward the exit, Jessica caught up with me, her wedding dress gathered in one hand. "You had to ruin everything, didn't you?" she hissed, tears threatening her perfect makeup, "just because you couldn't handle me choosing someone successful." I faced her calmly. "I didn't ruin anything, Jessica. I simply presented the truth with evidence. What happens next is the natural consequence of choices you both made." "We could have worked something out," she said, desperation replacing anger. "A partnership, proper credit later. You didn't have to do it like this. That option existed 6 months ago, before you emptied our accounts and took my work. You chose this path, not me." Her eyes flashed with a familiar mixture of entitlement and manipulation. "Do you have any idea what you've just done? Daniel's investors will pull out. The company might collapse. You've hurt dozens of innocent employees just to satisfy your ego. Those employees are building technology on stolen intellectual property," I replied evenly. "If the company collapses, that responsibility lies with you and Daniel, not me. You gambled their livelihoods on the assumption I wouldn't fight back." Jessica stepped closer, lowering her voice. "You never would have succeeded with this on your own. You lack the connections, the business sense. I did what was necessary to bring your work to market. Without my consent or credit," I pointed out. "That's not collaboration, Jessica. It's theft." She laughed bitterly. "Always so righteous. You don't understand how the real world works. Nobody cares who invented something. They care who brings it to market first." "Then you miscalculated. People do care about authenticity and integrity." "Your investors certainly seem to." As I turned to leave, Wallace Bennett approached with his business card. "We should talk next week. Your approach is exactly what our portfolio needs: authentic innovation with integrity behind it." I nodded my thanks and walked away without looking back at Jessica. The revenge fantasy I'd harbored for months felt hollow compared to the simple power of truth exposed. I hadn't needed to destroy them. They had done that themselves. I had simply removed the illusion concealing their actions. In the parking lot, James waited by his car. Well done. You maintained perfect composure. How bad will it be for them? I asked, surprising myself with the question. Legally, Prescott Technologies will likely face investor lawsuits, potential SEC investigation for fraudulent representations, and significant financial penalties. The patents they filed will be invalidated. Personally, Daniel's reputation in the industry is severely damaged. Few legitimate firms will want to work with someone who built a company on stolen IP. And Jessica? James considered the question carefully. Her professional reputation will suffer by association. Her role in the theft might limit her employment opportunities, especially in technology sectors where intellectual property is highly valued. I nodded, feeling not satisfaction, but a strange emptiness. The confrontation that had driven me for months was over, leaving a void that would need to be filled with something more constructive than revenge. "What now?" James asked as we prepared to leave. "Now we build something real," I replied. "The company, the platform, the vision, all the things they tried to steal, we make them legitimate." As we drove away, I watched the wedding venue recede in the side mirror. Beautiful lanterns illuminating a celebration that had transformed into a corporate crisis. Sometimes justice doesn't need to be pursued. It simply needs to be revealed. 6 months after the wedding revelation, Carter Innovation Systems occupied the 10th floor of a downtown office building. Our team had grown to 23 developers, with our platform now serving over 300 small businesses across the country. The wall of press clippings chronicled not just our technology's success, but the industry's renewed emphasis on innovation ethics. "The Parker account just signed," announced May, our client relations director, entering my office. "That's 3 major retailers this month." "Excellent work," I replied, reviewing the contract details. "Their supply chain complexities will be a good test of our new seasonal module." "Success is gratifying," May observed, "but I'm prouder of how we've achieved it, with transparency and integrity. That's rare in this industry." She wasn't wrong. The aftermath of the wedding revelation had sparked broader conversations about intellectual property protection and ethical business practices. Several technology publications had run features on the importance of proper attribution and the dangers of cutting corners in innovation. "Speaking of industry changes," said James, arriving for our scheduled meeting, "Prescott Technologies filed for bankruptcy last week. Their investors have approached us about acquiring the remaining assets." The news wasn't surprising. After the wedding exposure, Prescott's funding had evaporated overnight. Daniel had attempted damage control, claiming parallel development and coincidental similarities, but the evidence proved otherwise. When their chief technology officer resigned rather than testify falsely in depositions, the company's fate was sealed. "What do you think?" James asked. "Acquiring them would eliminate a potential competitor if they restructure." I considered it briefly. Pass. We're better served focusing on our original vision than absorbing their remains. Let someone else deal with that legacy. The irony wasn't lost on me. 6 months ago, Jessica had walked out believing she was leaving a sinking ship. Now, her new life was the one taking on water, while my vision, the one she'd dismissed, was thriving. That evening, I met Jessica's sister Megan at a quiet cafe downtown. She had requested the meeting, and despite my hesitation, I'd agreed. Megan looked tired but relieved as she slid into the booth. "Thank you for seeing me." "Of course. How are you holding up?" "Better now that it's over." She placed a small photo album on the table. "Mom and Dad wanted you to have these. They always liked you." I opened it to find photos from family gatherings before the divorce. Happier times that now seemed to belong to someone else's life. "I should have warned you about what they were planning," Megan said, her voice tight with regret. "I'm sorry I didn't have your courage. You were caught in the middle." That's an impossible position. The experience taught me to value myself even when others don't, I continued after a moment. That's a lesson worth the pain it cost. "They're struggling," Megan offered. "The industry blackball after the theft was exposed hit hard. Jessica mentions you sometimes, how she made a terrible mistake." "I hope they find their way," I said, surprised to find I meant it. Everyone deserves a second chance at building something authentic. Jessica asked if you might be willing to talk sometime. Not reconciliation, just closure. "Tell her I've found my closure," I replied gently. "Some chapters need to end before new ones can begin." Megan nodded, understanding. "You seem different, more centered." "Losing everything has a way of showing you what matters," I replied. "And what doesn't." Later that evening, I met friends for dinner at our favorite restaurant, a warm, casual place where conversations flowed easily among the wooden tables and local artwork. Frank was there with his wife, along with Dev and several new friends from my expanding social circle. "Ryan, this is Claire," Dev introduced as I arrived. "She's the UX designer I mentioned." Claire's handshake was firm, her smile genuine. "I've been following your company's development. Your approach to user interfaces for non-technical business owners is impressive." Throughout dinner, I found myself engaged in easy conversation with Claire about everything from software architecture to hiking trails outside the city. Unlike the calculated charm Jessica had perfected, Claire's authenticity was refreshing. "I admired how you handled that situation with your ex," she mentioned as we shared dessert. "Integrity seems rare in the industry. I learned success means nothing without character behind it." Frank raised his glass. "To Ryan, who proved that patience and principles still matter in this world." I lifted my own glass in response. "To new beginnings, honest partnerships, and the adventures ahead." For the first time in over a year, I found myself laughing without reservation, a sound that surprised me with its freedom. As the evening ended, I walked Claire to her car, our conversation continuing effortlessly. "I'd like to continue this sometime," I said as we reached her vehicle. "I'd like that too," she replied, her smile suggesting possibilities that had nothing to do with the past and everything to do with the future. As I drove home through the city lights, I reflected on the journey of the past year. Jessica's betrayal had stripped away everything I thought mattered: my marriage, my home, my financial security. Yet in that painful stripping away, something essential had been revealed: my own resilience, creativity, and moral compass. The company I now led wasn't just successful. It was built on principles that would sustain it through challenges ahead. The relationships in my life, though fewer, were genuine. The work I did each day served not just my ambition, but my values. I pulled into my new condo's parking garage, a place I'd purchased with the first profits from Carter Innovation Systems. It wasn't the largest unit in the building, but it was mine, earned through work that made a difference for small business owners fighting to survive in a landscape dominated by corporate giants. As I entered my home, I noticed how different it felt from the apartment I'd moved to after Jessica left. This space reflected not desperation, but intention. Books I valued, art that spoke to me, furniture chosen for comfort rather than appearance. It was, in every sense, authentic. Jessica had been right about one thing: success did matter. But she had been wrong about what constituted success. It wasn't measured in funding rounds or social standing, but in creating something of genuine value while maintaining one's integrity. The greatest victory wasn't exposing Jessica and Daniel's fraud. It was discovering that betrayal hadn't diminished my capacity for trust. It had simply refined my understanding of what deserved that trust in the first place. Looking back, I realized that what seemed like the end of my world became the beginning of something far better. Jessica leaving didn't break me. It freed me from a relationship where my worth was measured only by my bank account. Sometimes losing what you thought you wanted opens the door to what you truly need. People who value your character, not just your potential market value. Many of us face moments when we're dismissed, underestimated, or betrayed by those who should support us most. Whether it's family taking advantage of your generosity, colleagues dismissing your experience, or partners abandoning ship before your vision bears fruit. These moments test not just our resilience, but our self-worth. What I learned in those difficult months was that my value wasn't determined by Jessica's assessment or Daniel's theft. It came from within, from my integrity, my perseverance, and my unwillingness to compromise my principles even when it might have been easier. True dignity isn't what others grant you. It's what you maintain, regardless of how you're treated. The path forward after betrayal isn't always clear. The temptation to respond with immediate anger or bitterness can be overwhelming. But strategic patience, the willingness to wait for the right moment while building something substantive, often yields more satisfying results than reactive vengeance. My documentation habits, once mocked as obsessive, became the foundation of my vindication. My focus on building something meaningful rather than chasing quick profits ultimately created more sustainable success. If you're facing your own version of betrayal or dismissal, know this: your experience, wisdom, and steady approach are strengths, not weaknesses. The world may glorify flash over substance and youth over experience, but innovation paired with integrity will always find its audience eventually. Your worth isn't diminished by someone else's inability to recognize it. The next time someone underestimates you or tries to take what you've built, remember that the best response isn't immediate revenge, but strategic patience. Document everything, know your worth, gather your allies, and wait for the perfect moment to reveal the truth. The sweetest victory isn't destroying those who wronged you, it's thriving despite them, and because of the strength you found in the struggle. In the end, success isn't measured by defeating your adversaries, but by building something they couldn't steal: your character, your vision, and your ability to begin again with wisdom earned through fire.